Hi, everybody. My name is Richard Roberts. I'm the resident dramaturg at the Indiana Repertory Theater. Welcome to our Zooming post-show chat. Some of you may have seen the show, This Wonderful Life, and some of you may be looking forward to seeing the show. But since we can't be together to do a post-show discussion, Rob and I are going to do one for you. And by Rob, of course, I mean the other guy on the screen, Rob Johansen. You know him, you love him. He's done 49 shows now at the IRT. And the current one is This Wonderful Life, our first streaming production, which we're very excited about. And now here's our first streaming post-show discussion. How are you, Rob?
I'm doing great. Technology is our friend. I keep saying that.
Boy, and in this particular case, that's very, very true.
Yeah.
So I've come up with some questions that I think might be things that our audience might ask you. And the first one has to be, how do you learn all those lines?
You know,
and I have to tell you folks, we're laughing because that question is asked literally at every post-show discussion. But you know, if people always ask that question, they must really want to know. So Rob, what I wanted to know is what is really your process? How do you go through it? What do you do? And was that process different because you're doing a one-man show?
I try to get off book, to get memorized before every rehearsal begins. And what I mean by that is if I have the opportunity, whether it's a one-person show or a show that I have, well, like Murder on the Orient Express, my character didn't have a world of things to say in that show, but I began rehearsal off book, memorized, because I always feel like going in with the ability to never have a script in your hand, I'm looking at my partners a lot sooner. In the case of It's a Wonderful Life, I didn't have, well, my partners were furniture. But I could look at the furniture a lot quicker. And honestly, there's something to that because I was able to physicalize this role a lot sooner than if I had been holding a script. So I was very, very fortunate that Janet Allen asked me about this play, about my interest in this play, probably about 33 days before we began actually rehearsing. So
about,
yeah. And believe me, I did the math because the script is 61 pages. And I immediately thought, I want to do this play. Honestly, the IRT was still working out some logistical issues with how we were going to do the play. But I was trusting that it was going to happen. So I dug into the script. And by the time Janet wrote and said, okay, it's official, we're doing it, I said, good, I'm on page 8 in terms of memorization. And she was happy to hear that. And then when rehearsal began, I had gotten up to page 54, I think. So I was in really good shape for that. And in terms of how, this is also, it's a very valid question. Actors and people in theater will sometimes chuckle that audience members will ask that question. However, it's a very valid question, especially for a one-person show, because I'm trying to remember the last time I saw a one-person show. It may have been, Richard, one that you directed Millicent in, Millicent Wright. And I remember as an audience member sitting there going, how in the heck do you remember all this? And I'm an actor, and I've done one-person shows. So I think watching one human being carry on a theatrical event for 80 or 90 minutes, yeah, that's a valid question. So my answer, I got the script early, and also repetition is your friend. Not a day went by when I would not go over the lines that I already knew, and then I would press on. And if I could get 2 pages in a day of new material, that was a great day, because as you go on, you know, once you get page 1, page 2, okay, fine, you can bang out more and more pages. But then you get into the 20s and 30s. And
But you're still starting at page 1 every day.
that's what I try to do. And, I know most people know that I'm a big dog person. Well, the morning walk with my dog, that's when I'm reciting lines. The evening walk, that's when I'm reciting lines. And then during the day is when I'm studying the script to learn new stuff. And the other thing I do, I try to circle things in the script that are mentioned several times. If there's a word that's repeated, which good playwrights do that a lot, the characters will repeat each other, and that is a great cue for me. Also, alliteration. I love when playwrights, riff on sounds, and that really helps me. I'm like, oh yeah, this is that line that has 6 S's in it. So the different tricks like that help me a great deal. Yeah.
Great. Let's move on to the play. For those of you who are watching us, there's a program for this production. You can look it up on the IRT website, irtlive.com, on the This Wonderful Life page. And in that program, there's an interview with Rob, and he talks about his relationship to the movie. And you can read all about that on that page. But I'll just say Rob is a super fan of It's a Wonderful Life.
Yep.
So I wanted to ask you, Rob, you're so familiar with this movie from having seen it many, many times throughout your life. How did that help you as you were preparing the play? And also, what sort of pitfalls did you worry about trying to avoid?
That's a great question. The way that it helped me, this play began, I began my relationship with this play, I think when I was 9. My father always turned me on to movies in this time period. He loved movies from the 1940s. And so he turned me on to this, and I had great admiration for my father, both just as a human being and also as an artist. My dad was a beautiful singer, and when he liked something, it made me lean forward. I got into opera because of my dad.
Good for him.
I got poked a lot of fun at from my compatriots.
As someone who wanted to be a hockey player and an opera fan, I love that combination.
Yeah.
I was a voice major in college, and my voice teacher was a football player.
See, they can coexist. Cats and dogs can live together in peace and harmony.
Yes, they can.
So here's the thing I would say. I don't know how many times I've seen It's a Wonderful Life. Obviously, every holiday season, I tell a story, maybe it's in the program, about when I was 19, my sister Lynn and I watched one full version, It's a Wonderful Life, changed the channel, it was coming on again, and we were like, double feature. That's how much I love this movie. So here's a great way it helped me. I chose not to rewatch this movie once I was cast in this film, in this play, because I trusted that these characters have washed over me throughout the years. And I know on my really good days, I'm a good mimic. I trusted that I had the memory of those characters well enough in me. I wanted to go off of my memory, not off of, I'm going to study this film voraciously and get every moment, every nuance of imitation. The first time we read this script, and this is another bizarre thing, everybody, in our pandemic times, the first time we had our rehearsal was in a Zoom mode. And a lot of times, anybody that's been to the IRT and has gotten a chance to be behind the scenes, we do these things called meet and greets, where we have maybe 50, 60 people in the rehearsal room, and it's a lovely big community event. Well, of course, we can't do that. So the first day of Wonderful Life was a Zoom, and I'm at home. I read the play for the artistic staff, for the director, for the production team, and got no response. nothing. It was really daunting, but it worked out really well. And one of the first things that Janet Allen said to me was, you're a great mimic, but don't just rely on that. Make sure that these characters resonate personally for you.
Mhm.
And so I immediately thought, I don't want to use my good powers of mimicry and lean too hard on that. And that's why that day, that was a great note that she gave me. I thought, I am not watching this movie. I'll trust my memory, and I'm going to work hard on making sure that I'm coming from a place of truth.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, you can feel that when you watch it.
Oh,
Do
good.
you have a favorite scene or a favorite character in the play?
You
And
know,
is that different maybe from a favorite scene or a favorite character in the movie?
yes. I love all, this is the safe answer. I love all the characters. I love all the characters. Like, I fought to make sure that Ernie the cabbie, I don't put on a bunch of different hats and wigs in this show. Ernie the cabbie, I was like, Ben, I am always going to have that cabbie hat when Ernie the cabbie comes on. He can't exist without that hat. It was a big deal to me. Um, Now, of course, I would assume that my favorite characters are George and Mary, and in a lot of ways they are. But as I started working on this script with Ben, my two favorite characters, honestly, Potter, Mr. Potter, the nemesis of the show.
It's fun to be the villain
It is fun to be the Bill.
and not something you get to do very often.
No, and I didn't anticipate how much I would relish playing playing him. It was so much fun. And then the other one that I loved was Violet Bick. I just
Violet's my favorite character. I love Violet.
There you go. I mean, you feel badly for her. In the movie, I remember thinking, you know, she's hot to trot from the age of 9. What that scene where she's a kid and she's looking at George and she's like, I like him. And Mary says, you like every boy. And Violet says, what's wrong with that? She's just kind of a player. And I feel badly because I think she winds up being a bit of a lonely heart, you know.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
and she and George have, you can see that in a few different choices, and they might wind up together.
Sure.
So those characters are luscious, and it's come through because my family, most of my family's already watched this play, and they text me and they go, Rob, we love Potter. Is that wrong? I don't know. I love that guy.
All people need love.
That's right.
In whatever garden this is. Well, since you brought it up, have you watched it?
No, not yet. I will. And that's a great question. My opinion early on was, I don't want to watch myself. I'm sure everybody can relate. You live inside yourself. You sound a particular way inside your head, and you look a particular way inside your head. And then I see myself and I'm like, why doesn't somebody tell me that that's how I look? Oh my God. What is this guy? This bald bobblehead of a guy. Oh my God, this is a train wreck. So I initially was like, there's no way I'm gonna watch this. And Jen was a little bummed because she wanted to watch it with me. And then
This Jen is Rob's wife, Jen Johansen,
yes,
whom you have seen in many shows at the IRT.
many. I wish my favorite picture of us is when we were in Games Afoot, that great farce a bunch of years ago, and she was dressed in gold. She looked like an Oscar, and well, a female Oscar, and a really good-looking female Oscar, and then I looked like bald head bobblehead, but I had a good wig on. But there is a great shot of us. I'm sure everybody knows Jen. but she was so bummed that I started to think I should really look at this. And honestly, Richard, I'm more fascinated. I'm going to try and look at it from a technical aspect and not worry about how I look and sound. I really am excited to see how this was filmed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I will watch it. I will. Yeah.
Yeah. The folks at WFII do such beautiful work for us. It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. And why are we filming this? Well, we're in this crazy year 2020.
Yeah.
And so for you, Rob, and for many actors, I mean, your last job was Murder at the Orient Express back in March. And then, so tell us about, what did you do in the interim? What was your 2020 like?
I think I'm one of the luckiest people I know. I have a bit of a diverse background beyond acting. A lot of folks know that I'm a huge advocate for animals, particularly dogs. And I have been a volunteer at the Humane Society now for nine plus years. And luckily, I've trained to work with dogs that have some special needs, that aren't quite ready to go into homes yet. They might come to us shy and fearful. They might come to us feral, where they haven't had much interactions with humans. And I'm part of a team that helps acclimate dogs and get them to remember that humans are on their side and get them ready.
Oh,
yeah.
That's lovely.
So when the pandemic hit, it's funny. The pandemic hit and schools closed. And before people really knew how to protect themselves from this horrible virus, when schools closed and businesses started closed, the Humane Society was still open. Everybody brought their families and kids to the shelter. It was like, well, the zoo's closed. Let's go look at dogs, even if they weren't going to adopt. So for the first couple of weeks of the pandemic, I thought, well, I'm going to get the virus in about 20 minutes because the entire population of Indianapolis is now at the shelter. So we made some quick changes, and we had to close the shelter to the public. We also had to close the shelter to a lot of the people that work there and volunteer there. But because I work with the special needs dogs, I was one of about 6 to 8 people that could still go into the shelter, and I was deemed an essential worker. So I went from being a full-time actor and working at the shelter, 3 days a week, to being acting is done, and I worked at the shelter 6 or 7 days a week.
Wow.
And it was, I am so thankful. And I always say, who's saving who? Or are we saving the dogs, or are they saving us? That being able to have that purpose, because I know so many people are struggling with losing their purpose during the pandemic. I felt like I didn't miss a stride. I just switched careers for a while. So I was really lucky with that.
That's lovely.
I got to give a shout out to our good friend, Robert Neal.
Absolutely.
Actor in town. You've seen him at IRT over the years. Robert is a brilliant linguist, and Robert wrote a novel. He's been working on it for a decade. It's called Will Unto Law. It's available on Amazon. And Robert, Robert battled, he got sick. It's more than a year ago now. And one of the things that he was grappling with was the ability for his eyes to read words on a page. And he's such a linguist.
Yeah.
So Jen and I and Todd Reichman and Brittany Hyeth decided to turn his lovely novel into an audiobook. And we also, the lovely people at IRT allowed us to use the IRT main stage because there was nothing going on.
And Todd and Brittany are on the sound department at the IRT.
That's right. And so every Sunday, we got every actor in town that was available and interested to record segments of Robert's book. This is not a small feat. Robert is not short-winded. He He wrote a book.
Nobody who is as good with language as Robert would be short-winded.
That's right. So Robert wrote a book that is I think it's 157 chapters. Now there's some of them are short chapters, but it's a big task. I believe as of now, I think we're 45 chapters away from being done.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and we've employed
awesome.
Over 30 actors in Indianapolis have volunteered their time.
That's so great.
And I want everybody to know we are uber safe. Every microphone is 15 feet away from everybody else. Everybody is masked, and the only time the masks come down is when we record. That's it. So
that's so great. What a great project.
Yeah.
Two great projects. You've had wonderful things to do this summer. Well, speaking of COVID, I know you were uber safe in the rehearsal process for this play. You guys, the people who in the rehearsal room got tested every 3 days. The people in the rest of the building could not go into the rehearsal room ever. There was just so many precautions going on. How did that affect your rehearsal process?
So this is, okay, I want to say I am so proud of this show. Again, haven't seen it yet, but I felt so good rehearsing this and performing this. But the really bizarre thing is, I want everybody to know this is the first and I hope only time that from the beginning of rehearsal until the time I produced this show, we produced this show, I never got one laugh. Not one. Not one bloody laugh. Now, I will say, like, a few folks watching when we were in tech were like muffling laughter. And I think people didn't want me to get used to it because when we recorded it, it had to be silent. I know a few folks had talked to Ben about, like, why don't we get, some of the staff and that way people will laugh a little bit. And I think Ben Hanna, the associate artistic director who directed me, I think he was wise in saying, I don't want, if we can't have a boisterous 600 house bunch of laughter, 600 people in a house, I don't want it to sound like, well, there's 15 people in this big building. So he thought no laughter. So that was the biggest way it affected me. I think I really had to trust my comedic chops, Ben's direction. Here's the other great thing, Richard. Ben did such a great job honing the performer that I am. He used my strengths. And like many people, I think my strengths can also be my weaknesses. I'm a fight choreographer too. I tend to move in a circular motion on stage. Circles give me energy. If I decide to break a circle, it's for an abrupt change. Well, Ben tried to remind me that I had to be a little more flat in my movement because I couldn't really afford to get my back to the camera. Where when you're in a theatrical situation, an audience will forgive that for a moment. But in a film situation, you can't forgive it. And I had to fight my instincts to not fight my instincts, but I had to reteach my instincts for this undertaking. And I am so grateful. I think the final production of this wouldn't be anywhere near what it was without Ben being so astute to that knowledge of, you're doing it for a camera, pal. You're not doing it for 100 people. It was brilliant.
Yeah, that's great. So what was it like for you? You went through a 3 or 4 week rehearsal period, which is pretty standard, but then you did literally one performance.
No pressure.
What was that like? What was that experience like? And did knowing that was the case affect how you prepared?
Great question. So I'll take you through the last 3 days of this. All throughout the rehearsal process, I think everybody in the room kind of was walking this dual life of, hey, there's no pressure. It's okay. You're not gearing up for a 30, 40 show run. That's great in a way, because you can just like, boom, one time. But then the other side of it is, wait a minute, we're a theater. We want 30 or 40 performances. So we had that paradox going on. The other thing was that WFYI, the folks that were going to film it, said, hey, just remember, we can always stop and we can refilm something. So in a way, that let us off the hook.
Mhm.
But I didn't want to stop. I wanted, because you get a momentum. And I wanted the audience to feel that momentum of a live performance. I didn't want it to be like, oh man, you can tell Rob's sweating in this scene, and then the next scene he's not sweating at all, So I really wanted it to be one take.
Sure.
It is funny because the folks at FYI are film people. I think they asked Ben at some point during the rehearsal, they said like, now, he's going to know it. Like he'll know his stuff, right? Like he'll know to do the scenes in order or something like that. Yeah, we'll get there.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah.
So secret insider information, were there any retakes?
None. And I'm
good for you.
I'm so jazzed about that.
I bet you should be proud of that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Meryl Streep couldn't say that.
Well, I couldn't say that I get paid, but Meryl Streep gets paid. And that's
okay, now I'm going to get all dramaturgical for a moment and quote somebody. Okay. Film historian Stephen Hanzo. He says that It's a Wonderful Life is a Christmas Carol from Bob Cratchit's point of view.
I love that.
Now, you've played Bob Cratchit untold times at the IRT, and now you've played George Bailey. What do you think about that idea?
I want to say, Richard, and I'll let folks in on this. I think you let me hear that quote right at the beginning of the rehearsal process, and boy, oh boy, did that stick with me, because I think it's dead on. It's Christmas Carol. If Christmas Carol's a sweater, this got turned inside out before it got thrown in the dryer. And then it got thrown in the dryer and it shrunk down to fit George Bailey. Because it's interesting that, Christmas Carol, 85% of it is visitations from spirits. George Bailey's Christmas Carol, It's a Wonderful Life, is this big, long piece of realism. And then he's on the bridge maybe 80% of the way through the story.
Yeah.
And then the spirit comes. So that's kind of bizarre, I think I told you the first time I saw this movie when I was 9 years old, I missed the opening. I didn't see the angel part. So I start watching this and I thought, oh, this is a 1940s thing. I'm into this. I'm going to watch. I had no idea about the angels until George Bailey's on the bridge. And then I'm like, oh my God, he's going to jump. He's going to jump. And then you see a cutaway of this old guy looking at him. I'm like, who's this old guy? I had no idea he was an angel. And then I thought I'm watching an episode of The Twilight Zone, Yeah,
it is very Twilight Zone.
Yeah. I will.
For a Christmas movie, it gets very, very dark.
It really does. It really does. And I think, when you think about what Bob Cratchit goes through, for him to have a question of being able to provide for the ones he loves, there are some movie versions of Christmas Carol where Scrooge fires Bob Cratchit. And then, I could totally see him having a George Bailey moment.
Yeah.
And needing a spirit to save him. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Here's something I've heard you say, Rob. You have told me that you have thought about how George Bailey would deal with this pandemic today. What have you thought about that?
It's funny, I know a lot of folks have struggled with this pandemic, and so I don't, and I'm coming from a place where, I think the biggest struggle is that we've lost some people that we care about, and that we're worried about losing more. Beyond that, I have thought from the beginning of this pandemic terrified me. I think it terrified everybody. I had a text from my brother who's a scientist in January of this year saying, "Hey, just so you know, you might want to stock up. We might have to hole up for a month." Ha ha.
Yeah.
But once the pandemic took hold, and maybe we went to April, I started to really think about the word crisis. And there are some cultures where the definition of crisis is opportunity.
Mm.
And again, I understand. I don't want to sound flip about this. I understand there are plenty of people out there going through this pandemic that may not have opportunity to make this crisis, to somehow turn it into a positive. But I feel like if we, in any big or small way, and we're not out of the woods yet. There's a vaccine coming. There's a lot of good coming, but we're still not out of the woods. So what I would say, if we can all just continue to think, how do we make this crisis, how do we turn anything into a positive? For instance, personally, beyond the animal shelter, I talk to my family back in New York more now than I have in years. Thank God for Zoom. Here we are on a Zoom talk back. Every Wednesday night, at 8:30, my family gets on a Zoom and the screen is full. And it's like being at my mom's house around the dining room table. It's absolutely lovely. And I cited that to them the other day. I said, I know this is hard, but we're talking more, and that's a great thing. So I think George Bailey would try his best to build a positive infrastructure during this time. And you know what? Take some of it with you when we're done. When we get the magic shot and we can hug each other again, what can we take from this and
Yeah.
into our lives, Yeah.
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 That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And that's a beautiful place for us to end. Thank you so much, Rob. It's been great fun talking with you. If you haven't seen the show, you got to see it streaming live on IRT.com, IRTlive.com, know my own website, through January 3rd. So go watch it, tell your friends.
And this is a shout out. This was on the set. This is a picture of my grandparents in 1942. Bale and Bop were their nicknames. And I got to have this on the set with me. And it was so nice to always glance. Whenever I was scared, I got to glance over at my grandparents. So
that's lovely. That's lovely. Happy holidays, Rob. Happy holidays to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.